All right. I'll start with you all. Good morning. It was really good to see you all get some coffee. I think we all need it. It's always a hard one, the morning after the night before. But we tend to lose a few people who then slowly trickle in. And good afternoon and good evening to everyone else around the world following us virtually. So we're in at the second day of CodeBeam America, focusing on the airline ecosystem. And just a reminder, keep on being loud. Use the hashtag CodeBeam so we can find and retweet. And yes, internet code, for those of you who weren't here yesterday or not connected, it's CodeBeam and let it crash with a capital L. As a quick reminder, we are here to provide a safe space for everyone, so there is a code of conduct. If you're not familiarized with it, please do. Be mindful, both online and here, about what you post. And anyone facing issues or not feeling secure, please contact a member of staff, either through the app or come and speak to us directly. Quick reminder, a lot of hard work goes into the talks. Please provide feedback. Both, now when, at the end, they'll go around with a tablet, but all at the end of every talk, at the end of every session, but you also receive a survey where you can provide more detailed feedback, and, constructive criticism is always welcome. I think all of the speakers want to always get better and improve. And if there was something you liked, especially about the talk, please add that as well, of course. It's always welcome. Speakers can opt out from receiving this feedback. So, those, they've been informed. And what else? Reminder, we've got a Birds of a Feather session. So, you've got the flip chart outside where you can go in and vote for the Birds of a Feather you want. I saw there was a new title which came up between yesterday and today around the ASH framework. Another one is designing for scalability and reliability. It's almost like they took the title of my second book. There is one on adoption of Beam languages and frameworks, which is also very, very kind of important theme, even within the Airline Ecosystem Foundation. And there are a few more, one on embedded and one on technical depth. So keep on voting the ones you want to attend, and hopefully we'll have a repeat of the success from yesterday. I think we had a lot of really, really good conversations, with more to come. And what else is there? We've got, at the end of today, after our closing keynote, there will be evening drinks. Well, there will be farewell drinks, and they'll be served just outside here. So there's no need to go up to the last floor. We'll just stay here and mingle here on this floor. And then I suspect everyone will be self-organizing for a night out on the town. All right. So it's now time to introduce our opening keynote for today. And I'll pass it over to Amos. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Good morning. So, as a programming committee, we always try to invite people from outside the community to come and speak and give us their knowledge, something that we may not have internally. What those outside speakers don't know is that now they are forcefully a member of the Beam community. So today I get to welcome Dr. Savage. She's a professor at the National University of Mexico and at Northeastern University. An AI researcher in human-computer interaction, and so get ready to get your notebooks out and take a lot of notes, because I'm sure that she's about to blow our minds. So welcome, Dr. Savage, to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm very excited today to be presenting about how we can design AI systems for worker collective action. So a question that I'm very passionate about is thinking, how might we design AI systems that empower gig workers? So on one hand, what is gig work? Gig work involves conducting small tasks that you do for a number of different clients. It comes from the word taken from the music industry, where you're conducting small gigs for a number of different people under a small contract. And it's a very flexible type of job to have. Now, gig work has been on the rise. It is expected that by 2027, 60% of the US workforce will be involved in these types of gig work activities and where they have jobs that are mediated by online platforms. And now, for us that we're engineers and we're coding, gig work offers actually really interesting technical problems where a lot of the jobs are mediated through algorithms. These algorithms are identifying what workers should be matched with what tasks. You're working with a lot of large-scale real-time data from the workers where you're getting information about what tasks is the worker doing, how well did the worker do the task based on real-time feedback from the client, and then based on that, you're updating in real time the recommendation about which worker is going to be assigned to which tasks. And so we've made a lot of progress actually in around AI algorithms that are around gig work and working in these large-scale distributed systems that are now operating worldwide. And so several of you might say, okay, so if we've made these types of advances, why is it that you're so passionate about thinking, what is the future of these AI algorithms for workers? Well, the thing is that, yes, we've made a lot of progress in thinking about AI algorithms for gig work, but a lot of these algorithms focus a lot more on prioritizing the benefits of the gig platforms than thinking about the benefits of the gig worker. So, and part of the problem is that these algorithms and the data around these online platforms of gig work operate as a black box. So it's only the company who has access to the data about the workers, the clients, the tasks that are being done on the platforms. And because we don't have access to that data, it becomes hard for us to know, hey, this worker that experienced maybe an accident, was it a one-off thing, or is 60% of your workforce experiencing these accidents? And so maybe it's not a one-off thing, but rather it's a systematic problem that your gig platform has. The problem is that because we don't have the data, it's very hard to create interventions. It's very hard to know what is taking place inside these gig platforms. Additionally, and so as I mentioned, workers do not know if the issues they face are isolated or systemic. Additionally, this lack of data means that workers do not know if the platform is misleading them. For example, a digital labor platform might tell workers, hey, if you work for 2 more hours, you're going to be able to increase by 60% your salary. Come on, let's keep working. Let's keep driving on. And workers, the problem is that workers don't know what is actually the likelihood that I will be able to make 60% more of my earnings. Is it very likely that this will happen? Is it not very likely? And so the lack of data means that it's very hard for workers to understand when the platform is lying to them or making them false promises, basically putting a carrot on the stick so that they can keep getting work from them. And so given this context is that I'm very interested in thinking about, okay, so how do we design AI systems that can empower workers? What should these systems look like? And I argue that in order to create AI systems that are empowering for workers, we need first to be able to give workers access to their own data about their digital labor platforms. And so once workers have access to their own data, their own large-scale data about what is happening inside these digital labor platforms, we then need to create AI systems through which they can interpret this data, understand collectively what problems are they facing, be able to come together to think about ways of addressing those problems, and then being able to execute those problems. In today's talk, I will talk about how do we create these systems that empower workers to be able to gather their own data about their workplace and then also be able to understand what is happening inside their workplace and take action. So let's start first with how do we get workers their own data. So as I mentioned before, right now in digital labor platforms, gig platforms have access to a lot of worker data. But workers have limited access to this data. Workers currently are being surveilled, where almost every keystroke that they're doing is being collected about them. And as I mentioned before, this data right now is primarily being used to the help of gig platforms, make them more profit, and the well-being of workers is not considered as much. And so I argue that we need to give workers access to their own data. I take here ideas from Foucault, who argued that a way to fight surveillance, this is when somebody in power is watching over people with less power, the way to fight back is to give the people who don't have power now the ability to be able to watch over those who have power. And so that's called surveillance. Now, a problem is, of course, that workers are not data experts. And so it's not as straightforward to create systems that allow workers to collect their own data, because it's unclear how these systems should look like, given that workers are not data scientists themselves. So what we did is that I'm from the human-computer interaction area, and so what we did first was that we conducted interviews and co-design sessions with gig workers to understand how they imagined and desired tools to be able to collect their own workplace data. And then we analyzed those interviews, and from there, we started to identify principles, design principles for how these tools should look like. On one hand, workers wanted these tools to be able to operate directly within their digital labor platform. So this is an example of a digital labor platform. And they wanted, for example, to be able to track how much time they were spending on unpaid tasks. So something to consider is that digital labor platforms force workers to conduct a number of tasks for which they are not paid. So for example, usually in a typical office job, when you're responding emails to your boss, you're getting paid for that time. Within digital labor platforms, that is time, the time that you're responding to emails from your clients is time for which you are not paid. And so workers on one hand wanted to have access to data that would allow them to track how much unpaid time they're investing and how that translated also into dollars. And so based on that, we created a tool. And this work was previously published. And so this is a digital labor platform. And so the worker logs into the tool. Notice that here in this part, this is a tracker. So it's a web plugin that allows, this way, it's an independent web plugin that the worker installs, and that it's functioning and tracking all of the data from the worker. And so here, basically, the interface is tracking how much time the worker is spending on unpaid and paid tasks. So another unpaid task that workers have to do is search work to do. So again, usually in a typical office job, while you're thinking about what is the next task that you're going to do, you're usually paid for that. For gig workers, that is time for which they are not paid. And so through our web tracker, we were able to track how much time workers spent on different types of tasks that involve paid tasks. For example, right now they completed a paid task, and also tasks for which they are not paid. And so through this, we were able to empower workers to be able to start to collect data on what's happening inside their digital labor platforms, data that helped us to quantify that a number of the workers on these digital labor platforms were actually earning less than the minimum wage, especially when considering that they had to spend time on a number of unpaid tasks. And through this, we were also able to connect with US senators who were able to start to send letters to the tech companies to ask them to reconsider how they're treating their gig workers, which a lot of these gig workers are also the ones that are doing, for example, the labeling of images that we use for our AI models. And so they're the ones that are contributing to this billion-dollar industry related to AI. And so we were able to get a US senator to start to take action in terms of questioning the gig platforms about how they're treating their gig workers. Additionally, within Mexico's federal government also recently put out a new law where part of what they're doing is they're asking gig platforms to be more transparent and clear to workers about their algorithms that they're using. to assign them tasks. And so this is also very important because, as we mentioned, the fact that the fact that the gig platforms are black boxes allow for the platforms to easily manipulate workers. And so this is another way in which we can use the research to showcase, like, hey, a number of your workers are not earning at least the minimum wage. And it's important to provide workers with more transparency about what's happening in the platforms, and then having governments also take action can be very useful. Now, I also wanted to discuss, okay, so we started to see about empowering workers to collect their own data and how we can do it through these web plugins. I know several of you are working on distributed systems, so I want to also connect about what are some of the future directions that we can do in this space. I think some interesting things is thinking about decentralized data wallets. So thinking about, for example, blockchain-based personal data wallets that allow platform workers to own, manage, and share their employment records, ratings, and earnings. We could also think about immutable work histories. For example, thinking about distributed systems that help create verifiable work histories that can be used across platforms, reducing worker dependency on a single worker. I also think there's a lot of value in thinking about portable reputation systems. For example, thinking about a decentralized reputation systems where workers own and carry their ratings across gig platforms instead of platforms controlling their reputations. This, I think, is very important because a lot of the times it takes workers significant time to build a reputation on a certain digital platform, and so it's not as easy for them to transfer to a new platform. And so I think that there's a lot of value in thinking about these portable types of reputation systems, and thinking that several of you are interested in distributed systems. I think that could be an interesting direction to consider. Okay, so we started talking about having these systems that allow workers to collect their own data of their workplace, and we started to see some of the impact. Now let's start to see about, once we give workers access to their own data, well, workers now need to understand the data. They need to be able to look at the data and use it for taking action. And so this is the next type of research that I focused on. Here, basically, I collect the data from workers. They can also come from social media. And then right now I'm using large language models for, based on that data, helping workers to structure what problems are they facing. And then the AI helps the workers to visualize the problems that workers are facing, but then it also allows workers to think collectively about how to solve the problem, as well as go through the data to see if the AI made mistakes in how it was looking at the problems. And then we also have an AI-enhanced solution. So we want workers to work together to think about the problems that they're facing, but we also want them to have that human-to-human interaction where they're thinking together collectively about how to solve the problem, and then they also have an AI-enhanced solution that they can utilize. But we aim for the AI-enhanced solution to have a little bit less prominence than the collaborative solution that workers are coming in. And so we're doing that by pushing the AI solution to the bottom while we have the human interaction kind of pushed at the top. And so here we have where workers are sharing a summary of the problems that they're facing. And they can then analyze which problems are the most prominent. And then they can discuss, based on that problem, they can discuss possible solutions and also look at the possible solutions that the AI is giving them. And so through this, our goal is that workers can understand the collective problems that they're facing, and then come together to think about solutions, and then also utilize the AI to inspire them about possible solutions to the problem. I think there's a lot of value in thinking about how do we design the next generation of generative AI systems that are now more collaborative. And so since I'm in HCI, we do user studies. And so we had workers that were using our system versus workers in the control condition. We were able to showcase that workers using our system were able to complete the tasks of understanding their problems, finding solutions in a much faster way than the ones in the control condition. And also the solutions that they came up with were more feasible than the ones in the control. And so we're seeing that, and the control condition was basically a forum where workers were just sharing their problems, going through them, and then coming up with solutions manually, so no AI involved. So overall, what we started to see is that these types of human-AI collaboration systems were helpful for helping workers to more rapidly understand their problems and come up with more feasible solutions. So as we started to see about giving workers access to their data and helping them to come up with solutions for addressing the problems, we also started to think about what type of AI systems do these gig workers even want to see? And so we again did interviews with gig workers to understand what problems, what type of AI systems did they want to have. And then, based on that, we created AI systems that were worker-centric. This is that took the imaginaries that workers wanted. And so what we found through our interviews and co-design sessions was that workers especially wanted support for the invisible, the unpaid labor that they had to do. So as we mentioned, this unpaid labor was a critical thing that the gig workers were facing. And so they wanted AI systems to help them to complete this unpaid labor. Unpaid labor involved, for example, preparing their portfolio, preparing their cover letters, responding to clients. And so they imagined AI systems that would be their secretaries and managers, but they were their personal managers that were working for the workers, not for the gig platform. And they wanted the support for completing the unpaid labor that they had on the gig platforms. And so here's a video of the system that we built for workers. So overall, we did these interviews and co-design sessions, and then based on that, we created a tool that we're naming Office Mind. And this tool, one thing that we identified was that workers are not prompt engineers. And so we wanted them to be able to interact with generative AI in a very simple way and straightforward way. And so what we did was that we're creating forms that workers just fill out. And through completing the form, they can then start to generate the content with the generative AI without having to be prompt engineers. And so here they complete the forms related to the main goals that they have for their tasks. And then our system uses that to generate the content for the worker. And then the worker can directly iterate and work with the AI to improve the content and use it for its final output. I think it's also important, for example, us as engineers to think about what does the future of generative AI interfaces look like. A big issue right now is that a lot of the AI systems assume that everyone is a prompt engineer expert, and that's not the case. And so I think thinking about how do we change those interactions. For example, in this case, we're connecting with forms that are very simple. All workers know about forms, and so this made the interaction with the AI much more feasible. And then we did control, a user study, again, our system versus control, and we were finding that workers in our condition were able to complete unpaid labor in a faster way than in the control group. And so I think also there's a lot of value in thinking about now decentralized, for example, worker unions, on how we can allow workers to self-organize, vote on demand, and collectively bargain without a centralized leadership. And also I think there's value in thinking about how to have for platform accountability for discrimination and bias. For example, using blockchain or other distributed systems to record and audit platform decisions that might affect marginalized workers, ensuring more fair and legal accountability. I would love to discuss with all of you about how you guys see the future of these types of worker-powered systems, AI systems. And so here's another example of systems that we've been designing with workers that involve worker data plus AI. So this one is about culturally aware AI. Something to consider is that culture theory tells us that the way that people view time depends on their culture. And so people from, usually, according to culture theory, people from the global north usually prefer, they view time as rigid. And so they have strict schedules. They prefer that people do one task at a time. And they also prefer to have structured interaction. So if we're working right now, usually in global north cultures, they prefer we're working, we're just going to be doing work things. And we're going to be focused on this task at a time. And usually, according to culture theory, global South workers usually prefer, they see time as flexible. And so since time is something flexible, when you're interacting with somebody at work, it might be that your interactions are going to be not just focused on work, but also on other things. They don't expect you to be doing one task at a time, but rather multitasking is okay. And since they view time as flexible, it might be that you take breaks from work to prioritize a social interaction. And these are how people, based on their culture, view and prioritize time. And so one thing that culture theory has also identified is that, well, a lot of the technologies that we create come from the global north. And so, for example, from the US. And so as a result, a lot of the technologies might just follow the global north, the standards of we're going to be doing one task at a time. We're not going to be doing a lot of socializations when we're at work. And so we proposed to explore how, if we integrate culture, we could help, we might transform the work dynamics of gig workers. And so our tool, what it does is that it categorizes people on whether they're from the global north or global south, which relates to monochronic is usually global north, and polychronic is global south. It categorizes workers based on a short survey that it conducts. And then based on that, it creates AI recommendations about what tasks workers are going to be doing and in what structure based on the worker's cultural background. And so for workers who are from the global north, they're just going to be receiving these AI recommendations directly on the gig platform that they're on. And so they're completing one task at a time. They're very focused. We remove absolutely all notifications from social media. It's just a very focused work time. Workers who are from the global south, they also get this interface when, for working on tasks, but we don't remove any of the notifications from social media. And we also allow them to suddenly be receiving these work recommendations while workers are doing other things. For example, maybe they're on Facebook doing things. They might receive these notifications about possible tasks that they can do, or they're searching for personal things on the web. They can receive these work recommendations. Maybe they're working on the invitations for their wedding. They're still going to be receiving recommendations about the tasks that they're doing. And so we conducted a user study where we had workers from the global north using a control interface, workers from the global north using our interface, workers from the global south using a control interface, and workers from the global south using our interface. What we found was that workers in the global south, using our interface, we were able, this one was the only one that was significant, this increment. All of the rest was not significantly significant. What we found was that workers using our interface were able to increase their salary by 258%. Whereas for the other ones, we did not see any increment. So what does this mean? So we believe that for the ones who are from the global north, since they're used to receiving interfaces designed for their cultural background, well, a new tool that is giving them recommendations is not going to do much. But for workers that come from the global south, and this is the first time that they have access to a tool that is designed for their background, the increment was amazing. And so we argue that it's important to be able to design for all backgrounds that people have, not just the predominant ones. And through this, you can create much more empowering work environments. And so I took some of those ideas, and I've been designing, for example, for rural workers in West Virginia. And here we've been designing tools that are designed to help them learn how to get on digital labor platforms so that they can conduct work and not have to leave their rural towns, because a number of rural adults have to leave their hometowns to find work. And so by making them stay, by doing online jobs, is a way in which we can help these rural towns to keep their workers. And basically here we're teaming up with the public libraries. So for example, this is a map of West Virginia. And you can see, this is a map of the counties based on the economic levels. Even the counties that are distressed, highly distressed, they have a public library. The stars are public libraries. And so what we're doing is that we're connecting with the public infrastructure that the United States has And we're using the public libraries as a way for workers to be able to develop their digital skills. I've also been working with Mexico's federal government and identifying ways in which we can design AI tools that are based on the Mexican culture and provide better government services. So here, for example, we designed how an AI avatar that is guiding people to complete to get their passport. And through this, the Mexican citizens are much more comfortable and receive just better services overall. I've also worked with Mexico City's Ministry of Women, and we've been designing AI tools that can, again, understand the Mexican culture and provide support for the government workers to provide better support for the victims of domestic violence. And so this is like a little dashboard that we did that is primarily focused on helping the Mexico City's government workers to provide better support to victims of domestic violence and help them to give better follow-up, especially given the Mexican context. And so overall, I think there's a lot of value in thinking about what is this future of work? How does the future of work look like, especially when we're thinking about tools that are designed and focused on the workers themselves. And so I'm very excited to work together with the wonderful Beam community to work together and build these tools for the future. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in thinking about, for example, distributed systems for AI decision making, ensuring the platform's algorithms for hiring, rating, and payment are more audible and bias resistant. And so thank you very much. Thank you especially, I want to thank my good friend Lorena for the connection to the Beam community. And thank you so much, Francesco, for the great invitation. And thank you very much, Beam Code Beam community for having me and the entire Code Beam team for organizing this great conference and also my stay. It's been great to get to know you. Here is my contact information. And I'm very happy to take questions and really thinking together about how this future of work should look like.
Jason, are you still in here? Here you go.
Oh, great talk. Thank you. One question I had is one of your programs, maybe called GigSense, integrates pretty deeply with the gig platforms. What do you do if they change their interface or if it's like an app-only interface?
So, OK, for the app-only interface we've been working, we created a parallel app that is logging, for example, for the case of Uber, that is logging, that is tracking, for example, the number of miles that workers are working, the rate, and so workers also input like the rates that they had for particular rides. And then workers can share that information with each other to kind of verify like the alleged surge pricing that is being priced, et cetera. And so for the apps, we're creating parallel apps that are like basically workers, an app that is running in parallel to, for example, let's say an Uber app. And so this way workers can track their own data. But you do make a great point that the web plugins are, well, the web plugins, I would argue, we aim to make them so that we're tracking, for example, the websites that workers are visiting, et cetera. And so we aim to not depend as much on the layout of the interface. Does that make sense? And so that helps us a little bit in terms of not having to be as dependent on if the gig platforms decide to do changes, we can still function. But you're right that it's important, and that's important for us because this way we don't have to get the buy-in of the gig platforms, and we can still be operating. Thank you.
I'm just curious if you've considered or anyone's working on already the idea of like decentralized federated digital label platforms, like the same way like we're trying to replace Twitter with ActivityPub, like doing the same kind of approach for digital labor itself. So like the workers own the platform and it's, more open.
So I haven't seen it. That's why I was talking about that. I think it would be very valuable to think about like reputation systems that are federated. I think a big issue that exists is that for a gig platform to work, you need to get it's very important that you get the clients. It's easy actually to get the workers. But if you don't have the clients, the workers are going to be on the platform without making money. And so, for example, thinking about a federated platform, it's very important that we create plans for getting those clients on the platform. And so part of what we've done is, so in the past, in 2015, we actually created a new gig work platform that was called Demo. We had a lot of problems getting clients on there. And so that's why my work now focuses on, okay, let's work within existing digital labor platforms, and what we're gonna do is you're gonna have web plugins so that you can operate within the existing ecosystem, if that makes sense. So we consider, we live in a capitalist society, that's not going to change, and so we're gonna give you tools to better navigate this world. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Savage. The project that you had mentioned where you were trying to classify workers according to like a global north or global south modality, were you noticing any interesting trends coming out for workers who were classified according to a different modality than they would be traditionally associated with? Like global north workers who were given the UI for the global south, for example?
So, okay, so that's a very good question. So it could be, for example, that a person that lives in the global north might identify as somebody who operates as a person from the global south. For example, a rural worker might have certain traditions, like say, that mimic some of the global south traditions. So what we do is that we have a survey that, this is a standardized survey that categorizes people on, are they monochronic or polychronic? And usually people who are from the global north are classified as monochronic. And people from the global south are usually polychronic. But we have that survey so that even if you're from the global north, but if your work traditions are to be polychronic, you're classified that way. We did not look about but I think that would be actually very interesting to look at. We did not look about the percentage of people who, for example, said that they're from the global north and that they're monochronic, and that, or that they're actually polychronic. But I think looking into the future, that would be an interesting direction to look at. Thank you.
I have some online questions.
Oh, excellent.
From Matt. Sorry, I'm old. I got to hold the phone out further. Matt Milton. Amazing talk, love the graphics. I'm wondering if you could comment on the difficulty of getting a tool like GigSense adopted into a workplace. As in, do you think it's necessary for a union or some collective labor agreement to require companies to provide the tool to workers? Otherwise, what incentive would a company have for allowing its employees to use the system?
So, okay, I would argue that there's a win-win in giving better labor conditions because if workers are happy with, if workers are happy with, I'm just going to put the GigSense interface. If workers are happy at the workplace, they're probably going to produce better labor, and so that's a benefit for the company. But in our designs, we don't consider that we have the buy-in from the company. So for example, here we just had workers who tested out our tool. We're working with worker collectives who are interested in these tools. And so this way, even if the managers don't want a tool like this to exist, we don't need their buy-in. We're working directly with the workers, if that makes sense. But I do think that there's value in thinking about how do you get a win-win for everyone. Because right now, for example, workers have to do a lot of unpaid labor, and that can lead them to a burnout.
Anybody else? Questions? I think that's all the questions. Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, it was a great talk. This is really interesting. Sort of expanding on the last question, I'm curious, like the funding model for some of this, like obviously, if there was a union of some sort, then that's an obvious way. But like with a lot of like civic tech, like kind of being defunded in the U.S. lately, and I know we saw like the United Nations logo up there at some point. I'm just curious, like, how do you fund this kind of development?
Yeah. So right now I'm funding it through the U.S. federal government primarily. So for example, I won on one hand the NSF Career Award, which is from the National Science Foundation. They gave me significant amount of money for 5 years to fund this research agenda. And so the research agenda involves creating these systems. Also, I have to do education parts, which is, for example, teaching workers about AI, teaching unions about how they can use these tools to support them, and also helping high school students, CS graduates, to learn about how to create these AI worker-centric tools. On the other hand, I recently also won another grant from the National Science Foundation, also the US federal government, on AI tools for the workers. I think, so I used to work actually at Microsoft and in industry, and that was actually what led me to do this research when I got back into academia, because I realized that industry might focus on one aspect of the problem. For example, how do you support more the platform, which is great, but I realized that, oh, workers are being left behind. And so I think that federal governments should be very interested in this research because it's a whole research area that is more underexplored. I think also, like the United Nations, for example, is very interested, like intergovernment organizations. I've also gotten funding from the Global Partnership on AI, and they're also focused on, that's an intergovernment organization where different governments from across the world provide funding. And there we were able to get funding for doing AI systems now for the Latin America in particular. And so I think that it's important to realize that there is a gap right now in terms of tool building. And I think federal governments, and maybe also there's value also in thinking about maybe an economic model for workers, like creating a tool ecosystem for workers where maybe in some cases they could be paying for access to those tools. Thank you. Also, the work on the rural America, like AI systems for rural American workers, that was also funded by the US federal government.
We have another question online from Adolfo. How does the system handle hallucinations which can occur in generative AI systems?
So right now, how we're handling hallucinations, for example, in this case, is we allow workers to discuss the problems of the AI. So they're not forced to take the AI as the holy grail. We also provide here a message about that, oh, this solution has been suggested by generative AI that can have like hallucinations, et cetera. And we're valuing the human-to-human interactions. So for example, it might be that the AI says things that are incorrect, but we're allowing workers to discuss the solutions together so that they don't just copy and paste it.
Another online question from Mark. In terms of organizing, would you expect individual gig workers find and adopt these tools on their own, or is this something that unions might buy for their members?
So I think that right now we have been designing it. I think there's value for the two setups. So I think that, for example, on one hand, unions could definitely benefit from understanding the problems that they're facing together and then organizing solutions. But we are also designing, for example, AI tools that can work for the individual worker, where the individual worker is gaining benefits, but also the individual worker, if they share their data with others, they get even more benefits. And so I think there's value in thinking about the two setups, ways in which worker collectives, worker unions can utilize the tools, but also individual workers get a benefit. Because also a reality is that a lot of especially freelancers are very isolated. And so we have to design for both cases.
Anybody else? No more questions? Gracias y
Gracias.
bienvenido a la comida COVID. That's the best I got. Thank you.